think this is working. Now, this is the effect that we want to go for. On the right, we've got sort of quite a neat blend, and on the left, I've gone for a slightly more feathered blend that you can see there. What we'll go for is that the one on the right is actually a little bit easier in a lot of ways, and the one on the left, there's too much opportunity to sort of make mistakes. So we're going to try and mimic the one on the right. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is sort of sketch out the area that we want to be using. My camera, I'm just using my camera phone here, so you're probably not going to be able to see too well. But we just feather and sketch the area that we're going to do. We're going to be copying from this guy again. If I stick him there. So we want to go from light to dark to light, and then the opposite will be done on this bit of the blade. So with this, I'm just doing a very, very dark grey. You probably won't even be able to see it in those areas. And I'm going to go almost all the way. Okay. Down towards the bit that's going to be left purest black. You make the brush strokes in the direction, and always do this for every layer that we want the light to go. So we see this here. You can see if you look at the brush strokes, all of them are in the same direction. It's quite important that we do that. You don't need a particularly fine brush. You can see that this brush is actually quite old and a bit manky. I might switch to a different one later if I'm doing something particularly fine, but in actual fact, the fact that it's a little bit frayed will help me get the effect that I want. So that's Corax black there, but you know, I don't believe in these whole recipe things. If you just need any very dark grey will do. If you don't have a slightly darker grey, take a medium grey or even a light grey and just mix some black in with it. You know, we're not too worried about this. Try and be neat, but you can see I've not really gone particularly neat here because this is just like a first layer, and we will neaten up towards the end. I just want to show you that it doesn't take huge brush control. You can see I'm just going for it there. Okay, now I have switched to Eshin grey, which is really a good color. That is just any medium grey will do. And if you're working on a palette, just mix in a little bit more lighter and just mix yourself a lighter grey. You do not need to follow the rigid recipes that we see sometimes. And we're just doing the same thing. We're going to gradually lighten this all the way down. I am going to do this as quickly as possible, just so you're not watching a tutorial for fucking ages, but you should see the basic idea of what I'm doing. It's a bit bright for you there, but let's see if I can dim the light for you. Yeah. And we're just making that out. If I move that there, hopefully you will see we're going quite far down there. Boom, boom, boom. And it will become apparent as I go through the stages. Take your time. This is quite a long process. So you can see what we've got there is effectively a stripe with a black bit in the middle or a darker bit in the middle. We will refresh that. Another stripe, and then we've got another stripe at the back. Now I've switched up again. I've switched to Fenrisian grey, but if you don't have Fenrisian grey, just, if you're using a wet palette or really any kind of palette, just mix in a little bit more white with your grey and you get an even lighter grey. This is going to be the most noticeable now, and so we need to be quite careful. And we're just going to go, we're not going to go all the way down. It's quite important that we only go a little bit of the way, because that's what's going to give us our blend. I lick my brush occasionally just to control the amount of paint I'm putting on. I'll just try and build it up slowly. And if you make a mistake, it is fine. We are going to neaten up at the end with some pure white and some pure black. Okay, so you can see we're just feathering it there. The camera position is not great. And I will usually, to assist the blend, wet my brush a little bit, and just on this bit make sure that the paint is a little thinner in the middle where you're going to blend it. Okay, whereas up here at the top and towards the brighter area, I will apply the paint in a few more layers to make it a little bit brighter. We're just going to do that for a while. It does take a little bit of time, but hopefully you can already start to see the beginnings of the effect we're going to go for. Now, if you find you do want to keep your paint quite nice and wet, and as you can see, I'm just stroking it. That's called, this technique's called feathering. And maybe you can see the technique beginning. We're basically just sketching it out. Okay, now I'm doing the same on the back of the blade. As you can see, it doesn't look great yet, but that's okay. These things take a bit of time to build up. And we're just sketching it out. I'm keeping the paint quite dilute. It's not quite a wash or anything, but we do want to blend it quite nicely. This is the same paint as before, but maybe you can see it. So I've put quite a thin layer there, which has made it darker because the black beneath is showing through, and that's intentional. And then we put the same color there, and it looks a lot brighter. Do you see what I'm saying? So you can actually do this technique using just one color and slowly building up, thin layer to thick layer. You don't need to buy all 1,000,001 different paints. You can do it with techniques like this if you're a little bit short of cash or you don't have quite as much in your collection. And hopefully right there you can see the technique beginning to emerge. It looks like blocky and quite gross at the moment, but we can go back, and we will go back, and we'll reblend it. Okay, I've switched to very, very bright white, very, very bright grey. That's basically white, not pure, and this is where you'll hopefully begin to see the technique. And we do need to be a bit more careful at this point because it is very bright. And what I do is apply it quite thickly to the tip, and then feather it down. And you want less paint on your brush. You want a little bit more moisture as we go back and forth towards this end, so that we don't end up doing stripes. And this is what I'm talking about with the feathering technique, and you can already see the technique is beginning to blend in, I hope anyway. And then we do the same at this end. And if you think of it just like little stripes, and you're trying to blend the stripes into each other, and you can see the bright white really helps. It picks out the edges. But just feather it and be patient, be gentle. You can always apply a little bit more. Okay, and that's blended in all right there. Not terribly bad. You also want to start building up the edge. We will do the edge several times because we're going to mess it up several times as well. But it helps. Eventually, you get that kind of a look. Okay. And then we're going to do the same on the back here. I'm going to make you watch every brush stroke. I'm going to pause momentarily. But yeah, you can see because the brush I'm using is quite frayed, in a way that helps create some of the feathered effect. Although you can also just be a bit more controlled and use a nice brush. But there you go. You can see that that's what I've gone for. But we can see it's looking, if we compare the two, it's not looking quite as smooth yet. Not even slightly. There's still a few more things we need to do. So we're going up to a sort of a pure white now. I'm using a white scar for this, and any white will really do. And it's not precise chemistry or anything. You do want to keep it thin and apply just a few stroked layers to the very tip because that's the bit that you want to be brightest. And then just wet it slightly, keep it very moist, and just feather it downwards into the grey, and that'll blend it quite nicely. And you can actually use your finger if you screw up like I just did, and just if you get a little blob of water or whatever. I'm going to deliberately screw up in a minute and show you how you might want to fix it if you do. So I'm just going to go a little bit closer to the black than I would want. Okay, so you can see I've blended it, but really a lot of the blade is very white now, so we might want to go back. And to do that, all we do is we go backwards to our sort of medium grey, and we do the same thing. We just, but in the opposite direction. Keep it nicely moist, and we don't want to be too dry. And you can just do the edge there, and you can see we're just gently darkening down the bit that we've just darkened down those bits, and it's looking slightly better on the blend, but maybe I'm not too happy with that middle bit where it's still black, so I'm just gonna get some paint on my brush. Now, just to mention, I have a bad habit of licking my brush to get the right amount of moisture on it, but instead of doing that, you may want to sharpen it on a piece of paper like that, and that gives you the nice tip that you might want if you are doing something particularly fine. And you can have just a little bit of moist tissue or water to apply. As I say, I use my tongue, which is disgusting, but you know, it is what it is. And we can darken out this bit because it is quite important to get contrast. Now, if you're going for a display piece, you may not want the contrast to be this sharp, but on the board, it's going to be looked at a great distance, and having the contrast, you can see there already how much shinier the black is. You got to be careful with that though, because you can end up ruining the whole thing and having to start again. So I'm just redefining these dark areas of the blade, just the darkest bit, and then down here as well. And I'm keeping note that the strokes I use remain the same throughout, because it all shows through. Okay, I'm wetting the blade, the brush, just to sort of thin it out a little bit, and I'm going to go into that next layer of grey with just a little bit more strokes. You can go back over this bit, just make it darker. Look again, and hopefully you can see on the camera. It's quite difficult doing this around the camera, but I'm doing my best. You can see that's starting to look a little bit like what we were looking for. Now the rest of this, you've now seen basically the whole technique. That's basically everything. From now, all you're going to do is go back and forth, up and down, until you are happy. And depending on the kind of painter you are, you might give up at this point and be like, yeah, that'll do. Or you might keep going and be really pernickety about it. I'm going to do that a couple more times. I'm not going to make you watch that, and then I'll show you how to sort of get the edge highlighting and the wash. So as you can see, I'm just going up and down until I am happy with the blend. I may switch back to the white to enhance those bits in a moment. We want to make sure that there's a nice gradient between the white and the black, otherwise it just looks like you've sort of striped it white and black. This bit just takes a little bit of practice. So as I would say, I would get 5 of these, work through it, do one, and sort of see if you're happy with it. It is just a little bit time consuming, but if you want it to look good, you got to, like anything in life, if you want it to be good, you got to put a bit of time into it. So I hope you can see that blend's looking a little bit nicer. I'm still not happy with it, but you know, it is what it is. And I'm gonna now show you how to do a few little pieces on it. Okay, on how to just make it really, really stand out. If we compare the two, we can see that, well, one, the blend is a lot nicer on the left, but also the left has a nice blue steel finish that this doesn't have, and it has the highlight, the edge highlighting that really makes it stick out. So we're going to do those two things now. So finally, a little bit of Corax white, just across here. You want to keep that very central. Now, I know some people don't like Corax white because it's very, very bright, but that is actually what I'm using and what I'm into it for. A couple of thin layers of this will really bring up those little parts and make it shine. Like I said, for me, the purpose is to make this look graded at a distance. And one of the ways that we do that is with quite sharp contrasts. Okay. So now we're going to look at the edge highlighting, and it's just the usual edge highlighting technique. You're going to get it. Now, you don't need to tonally grade this. You want quite a pure white. I would use, previously I've been saying thin paint, but you actually don't want the paint too watery when you do this because it will run into the blade. You can see that there. I don't know if my camera, yeah, there, the camera's picking it up now. So we want to make that thick because we are going, well, not thick, thick is the wrong word. We want to layer that a few times, and because we're going right up against the black there, and it actually helps the black stick out at a distance. At some point we can see the edge of the blade on the back here. I'm not going to do that because you're just doing that with the same technique. I do the bottom as well because I'm ridiculous, but you probably don't need to bother with the bottom, to be honest. But you will probably want to tonally grade this in the same technique because I'm just showing you. I've not done that, I've just done the front. But as you go, you might want to do just a simple blend from like white to grey to black at the end there, because most of the time it's not going to be visible, but from some angles it will be. Okay. Couple of layers there. I've accidentally started a new video, which is not what I wanted to do, but never mind. Okay, so the edge highlighting is not too hard. You just sort of turn it sideways, put this at sort of right angles, and just stroke. You want the paint to be perhaps a little bit thicker than you were using for the blend, and then there's no risk that it's gonna run over. Now that's easy. Doing the edge here, you can do it easy, no risk. However, the hard part, and possibly the hardest part of the whole thing, is doing this bit of the blade here, because it doesn't stick out enough for you to use the sort of right angle highlighting method, as you can see there. And by freehanding it, you are risking destroying some of your hard work there. So what I would actually suggest is, if you feel like you've done a good job, you can just leave that. It'll still look good at a distance. We're still getting that nice sort of look. But I am gonna do it. I'm gonna give it a try. And if you need to neaten up, that's what you need to do. Okay, so I am just freehanding this to an extent. So we just wanna just do that there. No, this is difficult because I am not a great painter. Most of what I do is just patience and technique. Now I did try doing this just for a sort of simpler way of doing it. You can, if you get the angle exactly right, you can do it in the same way that we do everything else, but there is a risk. If you are slightly out, you're going to mess up your hard work. But you can see it is working there. But this does take some skill. It is difficult to get right, and if you screw it up, if you've got a little bit of white left on the brush, you can just neaten up any areas. You can see it's not completely perfect there. There's a few little notches, but at a distance that should be okay. So there we go. We've got our nice blended blade, and now, and again, this is something you've got to be really careful with. Now we're going to apply a wash. Now you can use any wash. I like Pterodon turquoise for this. Okay, so we're going to apply the Pterodon turquoise. You want to get it on your brush. You want to get it very thin. We can see our edges have come out okay here. And we're only going to target these blended areas. We want to leave the pure white and the pure black the way that they are. Okay, and we apply a very thin layer of it because it's a very, very powerful, very strong color. But you can already see that it leaves just a nice little sheen there. And it will just add a little bit of a blue steel look to the blade. It's very important that you leave the white. You can always go back, you know, if you've just done, like I think I've done a little too much there, and you can just neaten up. But you can see already it's giving the blade a nice little blue. Less is better because you can always add more. And as I say, this is quite a strong color. And I would always just add it in little layers and build it up. And there we are next to the original. I've just applied that little glaze. You see this one's a little bit nicer blended, but the only difference is I did this one a lot faster. And on, you know, when we're up close like this, you can tell the difference, but on the tabletop there will be very little difference, so you can just do it like that. I may go over this again. Like I said, I've just done that sort of slapdash as a demo. I certainly need to go over the edge highlighting again, just to shine it up. But yeah, that should give you the idea of how to do a very basic NMM.